you're very close to her family, and today is really a tough day for not only for you, not only for the family, but for people here in the Newark, New Jersey area.
Well, first of all, Don, this whole family has meant so much to this community. The first African-American mayor of Newark was elected in 1970. John Houston, Whitney's dad, was a part of that movement. He worked in his administration, he worked in community development, and that's how I met the family. But then Dionne Warwick is an icon, and her father started a gospel record company right here in this community, and they attended that church right there. This family and this community are inextricably linked, and so as a young activist, even before I was a preacher, I came to know the Houstons as just good folks.
Yeah.
I grew up about 2 miles away from where she lived in East Orange, and as her talent emerged, we saw a star in the making.
As we look this way, is this surreal to you standing here? We've got the media and all the satellite trucks. There's the abandoned housing projects behind you, and then in front of us, we're standing here looking at the, let's go over this way, at the New Hope Baptist Church, where Whitney Houston sang. Her mom was a choir director, and they're getting some dignitaries through here.
Right.
For you to stand here and look at this, can you believe that this is happening?
No, I told my wife this morning, I don't want to go. I can't believe it's happening. This church is so significant to this community. This was one of the first churches to begin building affordable housing for low-income people. This church, right in this building, had a job training program after the Newark riots.
This big building right here.
This big building here.
After the riot.
This church was one of the first churches in America to have a job training program for people in the neighborhood.
Newark riots, which year?
In 1967. The pastor of this church was one of the first ministers in the area of a mainline church to be on the radio. Every Sunday at 12 o'clock, New Hope Baptist Church came on the radio.
Is that why it was so important for the Houstons to belong to this church? Was this the church to belong to when you were coming up in the 60s and 50s, 60s, 70s?
There were 4 or 5 Baptist churches. Most African Americans in New Jersey are Baptist. And there were 4 or 5 churches: Metropolitan Baptist Church, Zion Baptist Church, and this church. This New Hope Baptist Church is really foundational to black people, not only in New Jersey, but around the country. The former pastor of this church who really built it, C.E. Thomas, was on the board of SCLC. When Dr. King came to Newark, he would come to this church. The Undertaker, I mean, just look at the links. The Undertaker, Mrs. Wiggum, is the daughter of the founder of New Jersey's only black bank, City National Bank.
Yeah.
And these two families go back to the 1960s.
And the Houstons were part of that. John Houston, Sissy Houston,
Absolutely.
Dionne Warwick.
They were all a part. Annie Moss Drinkard, the Drinkard sisters. All of that history comes out of this church. Then, of course, you had Lawrence Roberts, who was not from this church but connected to the family. He now is deceased to pastor First Baptist Church in Nutley, and he helped Sissy and Dionne with their music. Doris Duke belonged to his church. The wealthiest woman in America belonged to a black Baptist church.
Here's the interesting thing. Everyone's saying, Reverend, no prudential sinner. I can't believe they're not going to have, fans, because they also, they feel that Whitney Houston, we can just say Whitney or Nippy, that she was a part of them as well, and they feel some ownership. Now you're giving us context into why Sissy Houston said her homegoing is going to be at this church, and I don't really give a darn about the Whitney, what people call the voice. We're going to send Whitney home. We're going to send Nippy home from this church, which means so much to her family and this community.
Well, it's about being able to control the spiritual and cultural depth of the moment. The Prudential Center would be an event, it would be a spectacle, but it would not be consistent with the values of this family, this tradition, and the values of Whitney herself. This was the best way to articulate within the cultural and religious context how we feel about Whitney Houston.
Take us forward, please. What are we going to see? We're going to see some crying, some sadness, but we're also going to see some shouting and happiness and celebration.
We're going to see worship, first of all. Worship is a human expression to the divine. And so this is not a performance. This is a worship experience. And Pastor Carter, with whom I just spoke, is determined to lead a worship experience to ensure that God is pleased with the celebration of one of his children. And then we're going to see praise that hopefully will bring some comfort to the family. There is an unusual level of pain, but praise can overcome pain.
Reverend, thank you for putting that into context. As we stand in front of the New Hope Missionary Baptist Church, where Whitney Houston will be memorialized today, she will have, as they say, homegoing, not homecoming, right, ceremony, and then will be laid to rest tomorrow. Back to you, Gary.
Don, thanks the Reverend for us, and thank you to you also. We do want to mention that while Don was talking, we got our first live look inside the church. People are starting to go inside the church, and we saw the casket of Whitney Houston that was already garnished with flowers in front of the church. One other point I want to make about Newark, they were talking about the history of the Newark area. Fascinating city. It lost 40% of its population between 1970 and 1990, and that came after the 1967 civil rights riots. But between 1990 and now, it's actually gained some of its population back. About 275,000 people live there. It's New Jersey's largest city. And our coverage of Houston's funeral will continue throughout the morning. Soledad O'Brien and Piers Morgan will anchor our special report that begins 50 minutes from now at 11 a.m. We have great stories to share about Whitney Houston. Coming up next, the Pop Queen's former elementary school principal joins me live. Today will be a day of tears in New Jersey, throughout the United States, and throughout the world. Whitney Houston's family and friends are gathering at this church. You're looking at a live picture of the church in Newark, the New Hope Baptist Church, to say their final goodbyes. During the funeral, they'll focus on Whitney Houston's faith and her passion. One of those who will be there is Pastor Donnie McClurkin, who will have to handle his own emotions as he sings a final song for his close friend. Pastor McClurkin, thank you very much for joining us.
I'm glad to be here, Gary.
Tell me how you knew Whitney Houston.
Well, Whitney Houston became a family friend of ours when she took my sister Olivia, and they sang together for 7 years. She was one of her background singers and became one of the favored ones. So Whitney was at her wedding, and Whitney loved my mother, and there was a love relationship between the Houston family and the McClurkin family.
What will you be singing at this funeral service?
Oh, I'm going to try to sing a song called Stand, a song that I wrote some years ago. The Houston family loves it, and I'm going to try to get through that, because this is really an unexpected loss, man, really.
I mean, I would assume, Pastor, that will be very difficult. I assume it's difficult whenever you sing a song like that at a sad occasion, but how do you get through it? How do you contain yourself to be able to finish it without your emotions getting the best of you?
I really don't know, because that can't be a guarantee. Because a loss like this is something that is deep, and it's really, really powerfully impacting us. Not only did the world know Whitney, but when you knew her intimately and when you knew her as friend, it's a different scenario altogether. And trying to sing on top of the loss is going to be one of the most harrowing experiences, but by faith in God, we'll get through it.
I spent part of this week in Newark and East Orange and talked with childhood friends of Whitney, and I talked to her grade school principal, and people just can't believe it. They just can't believe this happened. To such she was such a wonderful little girl and a wonderful star and inspired so many people. I mean, are you still in the state of disbelief?
Well, Whitney was more than just an icon. Whitney was a real person, and she loved hard, and whom she loved with all of her heart. She shared herself with the whole entire world, but there was an intimate side of her that was so absolutely genuine that you felt like you knew her. Like, and all of our time of knowing her, it's felt like she's been family to us. And the way that she treated my sister, my mother, all of us, it's the way that she treated everybody. So it's going to be hard. People still haven't really registered yet that this is a real happening, but the loss is great, and it's going to really take some time to get over this one.
Pastor, she was known as one of the greatest pop singers ever, but her start, her origins, come from gospel. Tell me more about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, see, not just her start and her origin. Throughout all of her pop era, she was still singing gospel. Even in The Preacher's Wife, that's why that movie became so powerful, because Whitney was doing what Whitney does, gospel. Everything that she sang, even in the pop world, in the R&B world, she sang with the same gospel flair, because gospel's not just a music form. To her and to all of us, gospel is a lifestyle. And the one thing that you have to know about Whitney Houston is that she loved God, and it portrayed in the way she developed and even the way she portrayed her songs.
And how did faith touch her life, Pastor?
Man, if you had to deal with some of the things that Whitney dealt with, and we always brought attention to the addictions and the demons, but the only way to get through that, as she did, was with her faith in God, through prayer, through surrounding herself with people who would pray with her. There'd be times when we would be at an award show, one in particular I remember, and they pulled me into her dressing room. She was nervous, and she was wrapped up in her nightgown, and she was ready to go out, but her nerves were so overwhelming to her, and she just wanted me to pray with her. That's how she got through everything. When we paint the picture of Whitney Houston, we can't paint it just with her struggle, but we have to understand that she overcame a lot of hurdles, and the way she did so was with her faith in God.
Pastor McClurkin, I know this will be a very sad day, but I also know you will be very inspiring. Thank you very much for joining us.
Gary, thank you for having me. I appreciate this.
A who's who list of some of the biggest names in music will be among the mourners at Whitney Houston's funeral today. You are looking right now at live pictures from outside the church. We're back in a moment. It's a sad day for a lot of people today. This is a live look at the church where the funeral service will be held for Whitney Houston. It's scheduled to begin 12 o'clock Eastern Time. So that's about an hour and 40 minutes from now. Balloons, flowers, they've been there for days. But the people, the celebrities, the mourners, those who loved Whitney Houston are just arriving at the church to pay tribute to her. Her funeral today. Whitney Houston's godmother, Aretha Franklin, will sing The Greatest Love of All. Stevie Wonder will sing A Ribbon in the Sky. Alicia Keys plans to do a medley. Kim Burrell will sing I Believe in You and Me. And Grammy gospel singer Donnie McClurkin, who you just saw a short time ago, who I interviewed, will sing his song Stand, which was a Houston family favorite. From the moment she released her first album back in 1985, it was 27 years ago, more than a quarter century ago. And throughout her career, Whitney Houston reached new heights in the music world, setting records that still stand this very day. Among her many milestones, Whitney Houston's self-titled first album is the biggest selling debut by a solo artist ever. She's also the only artist with 7 consecutive #1 hits. And one of her signature songs, I Will Always Love You, is the biggest selling commercial single in music history. CNN has obtained previously unpublished photos of a young Whitney Houston. This is from 1982. She was 18 years old. The images released by photographer Jack Mitchell were taken all that time ago. And for more, if you want to look at them, visit our website at cnn.com. Coming up next, we will hear more about Whitney Houston's early years. Her elementary school teacher is on his way to the funeral, and he will talk to us before he goes in. And remember, CNN will have special coverage of Whitney Houston's funeral with Soledad O'Brien and Piers Morgan in Newark, New Jersey. That special coverage comes your way about 37 minutes from now, 11 o'clock Eastern Time. Stay with us. We're now about 90 minutes away from Whitney Houston's funeral at this, her home church in Newark, New Jersey. Around 1,500 mourners are expected to attend. A short time ago, the hearse arrived at the church. The casket containing Whitney Houston's body is now inside the sanctuary. And even more fans will be lining the streets to say goodbye to Whitney Houston. My friend and CNN national correspondent Jason Carroll is there in Newark. Jason, what's the latest?
Well, I guess we're getting closer to the final moments, aren't we, Gary, when folks will be